So I want to talk about the latter chapters of the book of Exodus 39, 40. And in 40 talks about the initiation, the beginning of the priesthood, the Levites. Leviticus is the priestly codes. The Kohanim are the priests. The Levites are the singers, the chanters, the functionaries in temple and tabernacle. And towards the end of the book of Exodus, we're told the phrase "Kehanli," inaugurate priests unto me for an eternal priesthood. Wash Aaron and his sons, then anoint them. There is an entry into any life of service, any life of sanctity, any life of creativity. We all have that formative moment, the play we did at camp, the first time we saw a watercolor, the first time we heard our favorite band and the desire to play bass just like they did. Whatever it might be, there is an initiation, and maybe it comes at birth, maybe it comes before birth in the womb, depending on your sense of when life begins. That we are inaugurated, indoctrinated, and initiated as artists by the legacy of those who came before us, made priests in this role of serving others through healing and prophecy and heresy. And it's work, it's holy work. I've said that many times. That this is a sacred time when you create a studio, when you make sacred time to paint, to record, to write, to sculpt. It's work that we do with the divine. And Judaism is very clear, perhaps in strongest contradistinction to the Catholic Church, which has a clear tradition of invested leadership. Judaism is very clear that we are in partnership with God, that we don't need intermediaries because we are engaged hand in hand with the Almighty. Imre Sofer, who is Zushi Sarkani, writing in Romania in the 20th century, says that blessing doesn't deposit on an empty vessel. This is probably in conversation about the tabernacle. The split between sacred work and profane work is human effort. One must do it, not resting with hands clasped, waiting for God to help him. That only blessing only comes on the condition that you yourselves be partners in the work. The classic story of the women on the roof during a flood, who prays and prays to God, and a car comes by to pick her up away from the flood. She says, "No, I'm praying. God will redeem me." And then a boat comes by as the waters rise and offers to give her a spot on the boat to escape the flood. And she says, "No, God is coming for me." And then a helicopter, and she says the same to that helicopter pilot. And of course, she drowns. And she sees God at the holy gates and says, you didn't rescue me. I expected it. And God says, "Well, I sent a car and a boat and a helicopter." You have to participate in the work of holiness. Inspiration is, tell my children, and talent and inspiration are maybe 10% of the work, and 90% is, or 80% is hard work, craftsmanship, diligence, and maybe the last 10% is a bit of luck in terms of artistic success, or at least material success. And there are ways to get in our own way. There are ways to transgress our own powers, our own capacities, our own talent. The furnishings of the tabernacle were all for service, avodah, which can mean sacrifice, can mean service, can mean even prayer in later rabbinic conceptions. And perhaps the antonym of service, not exactly, I'm not sure if I would define it, is called me'ilah, which is transgression of the sacred, right? Using sacred things for profane ends. Eating of a holy meal because you are hungry rather than because it is a participation in what's called theastai, which is godly meal, godly table fellowship. We can transgress our talent and use them for unsacred ends, to make art that is inoffensive, to make art that is explicitly commercial. And again, I don't want to suggest that it's not okay to have inoffensive art or commercial art. It's not okay, I want to say, to make explicitly commercial art, as the Black Eyed Peas did. To make explicitly inoffensive art, as perhaps Kenny G does. I don't know. Michael Bolton. I can't say. I probably don't feel that way, but it seems that way to me. That's me'ilah. That's taking sacred and using it to profane. Then it takes work. It takes work to bring the holy within, to bring the holy into the work, to bring the holy into the process, to really allow the inspiration to suffuse the space of a canvas or a recording studio. They bring the tabernacle to Moses at the end of these long processes towards the last third of the book of Exodus. And Moses blesses the tabernacle such that God might dwell with him. And in Talmud, Rabbi Zerika raises a contradiction. It says Moses was not able to enter the tent in one place, And it says Moses entered in the cloud. And it's to tell us that God took Moses and brought Moses into cloud and tabernacle. There is, as I've said, an entering in, a partnership, a work. And I think what's said here is the work happens on both sides. God is continually sending helicopters and boats and cars and inspiration and the Holy Spirit, the cloud. And we enter in and pull God towards us and pull God into the canvas, pull God into the writing desk. We work on both sides. And it's okay if it's not perfect. I don't think perfect is a real word. I've never seen anything perfect. Outside my window, there are no perfect trees. There are no straight lines. Inside of me, there are no cells that are perfectly even. There are no things that work just right every time. We're always works in progress. That's what makes us pretty delightful. There is this sense that there were no deficiencies in the making of the tabernacle. Khatam Sofer, who was writing in Slovakia, Moses Schreiber writing in Slovakia, late 18th century, early 19th century, said that all the gifts were used up. There were no deficiencies, but that's not likely the case. There are always some bolts we leave don't use when we're fixing this sink, or some paints we can't incorporate. And part of the work of knowing how to is knowing when to end a painting, an artwork, a song, knowing not to be too fussy. So I want to conclude more or less with the values of mistakes, the values of imprecision. So in Talmud, the school of Yanai said that Rabbi Yossi the Galilean said that we heard it's possible to ascertain simultaneity in natural practices, by which they mean perfect tolerances, exactitude, maybe perfection. And no, he says, and how much more so it's possible for humans to do it. But the rabbis, his counterparts, suggest that that's not possible. It's impossible to view anything as perfect. Um, the measurements of the furniture, the sanctuary said, do it, and however you do it, it will be satisfactory. There's an understanding that humans can't measure, even if you measure things thrice, it's imprecise. Even electron microscopes have a level of precision. Even the greatest mathematician has a level of precision. How much more so the artist, the craftsman? And it's that wabi sabi, it's that fragileness, it's that imperfection, it's that irregularity that makes the work human and valuable and of meaning. My wife's pottery sells for more than production pottery, and that's because every work is unique. And God is described in the second chapter of Genesis as if a potter gathering humans out of dust. And pottery is never thrown perfectly, always a little wobbly, always a crack, always a craze. That's what it's called in the glaze, when a little crack or crevice in the glaze, little irregularities. That's what makes it beautiful. That's what makes it truthful. That's what makes it human and authentic. James Joyce in Ulysses says, a man of genius makes no mistakes. His errors are volitional and are the portals of discovery. So, in all of this, in this work to be partners with God, to be anointed, to enter into the priesthood of artists and creators, to draw God in and be drawn in by God, know that it's a forever work in progress. There's no such thing as perfect. The word perfect is a misnomer. It doesn't really apply to anything I've ever seen. And the work is to be approximate, to get as close as possible to what might be an ideal, but to allow those in studio errors, those fortuitous and serendipitous aspects of painting, writing, a turn of phrase that occurs to you when you write in a white heat at 3 in the morning. Those are important. Those are godly as well.